Look at that. Perfect timing. So we have Matthew Vernhout up next, who's probably going to correct me for maybe the millionth and first time on the pronunciation of his name. Been friends with Matt for many, many years. And yeah, for whatever reason, I will never get it right. Real honor having Matthew open up Deliverability Summit North America. In fact, providing the first session for the Festival of Email. He does a lot for the community. He's a brilliant mind when it comes to all things authentication and an awful lot more. And yeah, you can find him pretty much at every single event everywhere, as well as organizing his own, the Canadian Email Summit. And yeah, we're very, very grateful that he's found the time in his busy schedule to join us here. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for inviting me to speak, Andrew. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for the event. So
brilliant. Well, I'm going to hand over to you and let you get on with the presentation. Amazingly, we're bang on time. So let's hope it bodes well for the rest of the Festival of Email.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. Let me just share my screen here and we'll get started as soon as it's ready. Andrew, let me know if you can see that, please. Hopefully you can. All right, we're just going to assume that you can all see this now. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Matthew Vernhout, as Andrew mentioned. I will eventually teach him how to say my last name. Pronounce all the letters, Andrew. All the letters. As Andrew mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Deliverability for Netcore Cloud. You can find me everywhere at emailkarma.net. I've been in the email space over 20 years now, doing deliverability and privacy and all types of email-related things. So certainly excited to be here and kick off the event. I'm going to talk today about how authentication not only stops fraud, but how authentication helps your brand get more messages in the consumer inbox, which in turn leads to more messages being engaged upon. I have one case study that I'm going to present a condensed version of. It's a former client of mine. And talk about sort of how deliverability helped them and the impacts of doing it well. But I'm going to go through first with, I guess, the scary parts, if you will. So fraud is everywhere. Fraud is no longer just things that, we think about in regards to wire transfers, but fraud is everywhere. There's phishing emails. Looking back at this quarter, right? Think about how many phishing emails you've received, how many unsolicited phone calls you've received, and then really sort of put it into context and say, if you're getting these as an individual, how many are your customers getting? Your customers are probably getting a lot. So not only are your messages competing in the inbox against other marketing messages, you're competing for your consumers' attention against fraudsters, phishers, and spammers as well. So making sure that you can stand out in the inbox, making sure that you can stand out for your consumers really is something that you need to do to help not only yourself, your staff members, your fellow staff members in your organization, but your consumers. And this is an important thing. I always like to think consumers first. How do we really focus on helping consumers? So in the first quarter of 2021, Microsoft was targeted as one of the biggest phished brands on the planet. Almost 40% of phishing messages targeted Microsoft trying to access people's accounts. This is pretty incredible to think about it, especially as more people moved into working from home, working remote, and looking at just different changes into the business ecosystem. If I can compromise your business email account, I can talk to all your customers, likely in a way that's fully authenticated. So definitely make sure that you are taking steps to protect your brand from these types of behaviors. Spam, 88 billion spam messages sent every day, according to Talos Threat Intelligence. So this is pretty incredible to say 88 billion spam messages a day against a volume of what they predict to be 16 billion legitimate messages. So the numbers are just staggering when you look at it from an annual point of view, but on a daily point of view, that's pretty crazy as well. As well as over the last 5 years, the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, or the IC3, has seen a 260% growth in complaints of fraud and malicious activity targeting consumers and brands. So this isn't a problem that's getting any better. It's a problem that's going to continue to get much worse. And what we need to do as an industry is make sure we're doing our part as best we can to protect consumers. So what is the cost of doing nothing, right? If you do nothing, you risk all of these things targeting your brand: compromised accounts, financial loss, loss of confidentiality. Imagine being a law firm that gets compromised. All of that client confidential information is now publicly available, and there are lots of other repercussions to that beyond just sensitive information being in the wild. Intellectual property can be stolen. We've seen this a lot when it comes to foreign state actors reaching into organizations to work within them and get access to very sensitive business information. Malware infections and ransomware infections are on the rise. You hear about these every day. Probably the most significant one in the news recently was the oil pipelines on the East Coast of the United States, which really impacted oil prices globally. So there are lots of different things that are happening, and most of them are driven by phishing, by malware, by spam. So again, if we can look as an industry on the number of things that we are doing to help protect brands and doing well, or in many cases not doing well, we should focus on where we can fix these, because in the end, if you do it well, you actually get better performance in your email list. So in a study in 2020 by IBM, they predicted the average compromise, so data breach, cost $4 million, just under $4 million to resolve. That doesn't even include potentially any type of class action lawsuit that comes. That's just to close the loop, figure out what happened, and make sure your systems are secured or recovered. So that's pretty incredible, the numbers. They're pretty staggering when you think about it that point of view, right? Is your business willing to write a $4 million check for not doing things appropriately? Forget everything else other than the loss of consumer trust. Recovering from data breaches is extremely hard. We've seen brands do it, but not every brand is going to be able to recover, right? We've seen data breaches from Target. They recovered quite well. We've seen data breaches from British Airways. They also recovered quite well. However, all of these things lead to a loss of consumer trust, as well as other financial issues that companies need to pay attention to afterwards, maybe credit monitoring and these types of additional fees. So certainly paying attention to things that you don't want to be part of, those are high on the list. But it's not all bad news, right? The industry is evolving. The industry is really focusing on how do we get better at protecting consumers. Looking back at BIMI Radar, which is provided by Redsift, in the beginning of 2020, January 2020, there was monitored by their platform 822,000 domains using DMARC, of which 246,000 approximately were using DMARC ad enforcement. That's pretty good if you think about it from the numbers, right? We're almost at 1 million, 250,000. Seems pretty good. However, looking a year ahead, so January 2021, they're now tracking 1.65 million domains using DMARC and almost 600,000 with an enforcement policy. So that's a staggering number of things to consider. In a year, the industry has really looked at how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our domains? And of these tools at our availability, at our hands that we can use, what are the things that we need to pay attention to? In this case, DMARC is a great tool. It forces really strong authentication. It forces you to pay attention to where your domains are coming from. It forces your service providers, in many cases, to provide new services, such as domain alignment, that they may not have been providing in the past. So we've seen a huge growth in regards to DMARC. which is great because alongside of that, we've seen a significant growth in services like BIMI. And I'm going to talk about BIMI in a couple more slides. But right now, we are looking at, early January, really not many people were doing BIMI at all. In fact, there was probably a handful of domains at that point that even knew what BIMI was. Fast forwarding, the same data set from BIMI Radar, as of the first of the month, they're tracking somewhere north of 5,000 domains. So not bad. They're adding about 1,000 domains a month doing BIMI, which also means those 1,000 domains or 5,000 domains are also practicing extremely strong DMARC policies. So there are a lot of good things happening. What we need to continue to do is drive this momentum as an industry, drive this momentum as brands, and continue to push forward utilizing good authentication practices. And really, I think when you see the case studies, you'll understand why. But, how do you do this? Think about your house, right? You lock your doors at night. You go to bed, you lock your doors. Maybe even all day you lock your doors. So consider utilizing strong passwords, two-factor authentication. So as a service provider, by default, we require clients to use two-factor authentication. This is a good protection solution because it requires sort of the three key elements of security, right? Who you are, your username, something you know, your password, and something you have. And the idea of something you have is that two-factor authentication token, whether it's sent to you through email, whether it's sent to you through an SMS message, or whether it's sent to you using one of the authenticator apps. These types of things help you lock the door on things like account takeover, account compromise, which we've seen a tremendous growth in over the years in regards to how do you, we've as an industry made it very hard, or much harder for people to compromise accounts. It's no longer just username and password. Having two-factor authentication adds that additional layer of protection and really makes it so that your account is that much harder to take over. So I might have your username and password, but if I don't have your phone, if I don't have your token, I can't log in as you. It gives you a chance to protect your account with one additional layer. So if you're not using this in your email clients, or you're not using this on your social platforms, or you're not using this with your email provider, certainly consider implementing this or requesting that your service provider provide this type of service. It's a little bit more friction, but in the end, it makes a significant contribution to the security of your accounts, which then leads to the security of your consumers, and then thinking about consumers. Think before you connect. This is also a huge thing right now. Lots of fraud happening in the social platforms. Lots of accounts being set up that are using stock image photography for avatars, trying to build those relationships so that they can get a better understanding of your business, so that they can implement things like spear phishing campaigns, or simply harvest your email address so that they can start sending you unsolicited offers. There are lots of different things that are happening when you connect with somebody over a social platform. This is also something I see frequently on social platforms. What was your first car? What was your first school? Think about the questions you're answering on these social platforms, because these are oftentimes the same security questions you're being asked to provide to your bank. Your mother's maiden name, where you went to school, what the first car you owned was, these types of things. Every time you answer these, you're providing a window for somebody to look behind the curtain and access your accounts. So simply stop participating in these games if you can. Pay attention to data breaches that impact you. This is something, again, I think that a lot of people don't pay attention to. If you haven't subscribed to a service that monitors solutions for data breaches, most likely as a consumer, the one I use personally is called Have I Been Pwned? It allows me to monitor my domains. It allows me to monitor my individual accounts and receive notifications if they are part of a data breach. You'd be surprised the number of times your address is part of a data breach because some data aggregator put it into a unsecured cloud Elasticsearch database. All of these things, when combined, will find profile information, will find password combinations that may already unlock your account. So that goes back to my first point of strong passwords are necessary and unique passwords are necessary. And then I'm a big proponent of educating others. not just educating others in the industry, because this is something that I've been very passionate about for the last 14, 15 years, is educating others in the industry. But I spend a lot of time educating my family and my friends about these same policies, because as I mentioned earlier, it's not just large brands that are now targeted for fraud and phishing and other types of bad activities. So make sure that you are educating others and sharing this information. I think this is one of those things, as email geeks, as the email industry, we're very good at talking to each other. We're very good at talking to our customers, but we don't necessarily pass that information to those people that aren't part of the industry the way we are. So certainly make sure you're having those conversations, especially when you look at your spouse or your children or your parents, grandparents, etc. All of these individuals need to understand their victims and their potential victims or potential targets. The other part to that is, if they're compromised, that can lead to a compromise of your own software, your own self, because there's now a trusted person within your network that's compromised. So make sure that you're educating others. And I know this has been a lot of doom and gloom, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? So there are several things to consider. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't try to be too fancy with your subject lines, right? One of the things I was looking at as I was researching and getting ready to talk about this was really what type of subject lines were used to try to compromise accounts over the last year as everybody moved home, as everybody moved to a full remote workforce. So some popular subject lines, as seen by KnowBe4, which is a security research company, things like a vacation policy update. Who's not going to click on that if it's sent to your business email? Dress code changes for virtual meetings. So these are things that people would want to know about, right? Review of company policies. We've also seen several phish tests that make the media, where companies are trying to train their internal employees not to click on malicious links, but they're sending things like your bonus plan in light of COVID. So there are internal tests that are actually focusing on trying to trick employees, but they're doing it in such a way that it is hard. People are failing significantly. You should test your customers, you should test your employees, but you shouldn't test them in a way that's almost guaranteed to fail. So, and I say that in the meaning of, you want them to fail so they learn, but you also don't want them to fail and get angry about failing, right? These are very sensitive topics for a lot of people right now. So have some compassion, consider the audience that you're messaging, authenticate your email, work very closely with your support and IT and security teams. And this is an important one. I've seen time and time again where a brand sends a message, and I'm talking, I've probably seen this every year, multiple times since I started in the industry. Your brand will send a message. Consumers will look at it and be suspect of the message for whatever reason. They will reply to your support team. Your support team may not know that it is a legitimate message, and they will respond back to the consumer saying, no, this is potentially fraud, you should report it. And there you've completed a cycle of self-reporting your own email as spam to mailbox providers, which then drives your reputation down, which then drives engagement down, etc. So you need to make sure that all of your teams are working in concert and understand that your program sends these types of communications on these schedules with these domains, and potentially even include them so that they're aware of what's sent, what's legitimate, and what's not. This is all part of that internal communication that needs to happen to really drive solid practices and make sure you are communicating with not only your customers, but you're communicating with your internal teams. And chances are, with the proliferation of hosted email solutions, such as the Google Workspaces and Office 365 applications, chances are you're already using inbound authentication tools for your email, and you may not even know it, right? Google is absolutely checking SPF, they're absolutely checking DKIM, and they're absolutely checking DMARC, along with Yahoo Mail, Microsoft Office 365, Hotmail, all the major providers are already checking these solutions. So it's better to plug in and participate as opposed to ignore it and hope that you don't get seen by those bad actors. It takes time and you need a solid plan. And I know this is still sort of doom and gloom, but we're getting to the good part. I trust you. Trust me. So security takes time, it takes a plan, and it takes a village to implement. You need to work with all of your teams. You need to work with all of your solution providers. You need to work with every vendor that sends email on your behalf. You need to separate your domains by subdomains. There was a great article that was just written and published on the Kickbox blog about subdomains, how you should set them up, and the types of things that you should do in order to build the right subdomain for the messages that you're sending. So if you have marketing communications, use one subdomain. If you're using Freshdesk or Zendesk to do tickets, set up a separate subdomain just for that. If you're sending transactional messaging, use a separate subdomain for that. Multiple vendors, give each vendor a different subdomain. But use subdomains. Avoid things like cousin domains, which would be, domain-mail.com as an example. So these types of things provide not only your customer trust that it's your brand, your team insight into it's your brand being used appropriately, but into the anti-spam world, they can look at it and they can quite easily determine that a subdomain is approved by the business as opposed to a cousin domain or a lookalike domain being legitimate or not. As well as domain alignment. And this is a critical one as well as we move forward into authentication, which is the whole sort of end of this discussion. So when you look at domain alignment, that means your envelope from, your mail from, and all of your authentication records use the same domain structure. So marketing.email.com is a subdomain of email.com. Therefore, there is alignment when you do domain keys against any type of email.com domain in a relaxed environment. Same with SPF. You would publish a subdomain on an SPF record on subdomain.email.com. So as you align these structures and make sure you talk to your providers about this, you get one additional piece of the puzzle that becomes much more connected in regards to email and domain security. It's a multi-layered approach. All of the platforms that I've talked about and will talk about for the rest of the day layer together nicely. None of them compete. They work in a cohesive way. They were designed that way. I will say there's no shortcuts to this. And it is one of the most frequently, misconfigured areas that I stumble across when working with prospects, clients, and just in general when my friends ask me questions about why is my domain behaving in an XYZ fashion. So this is one of those critical pieces to pay attention to. Talk to your vendors, talk to your IT team, make sure that they understand the requirements and make sure that they understand what they need to do. There are no shortcuts to authentication and doing it well. This is a great quote. I love this quote. If you don't know Chris Arundale, he's the Chief Privacy Officer at Trendline Interactive. Chris is a good friend of mine. I've known him a long time. We were talking a while back. He gave me this quote in 2018, and it still absolutely stands up today, and I've seen similar results. When working to configure DMARC for a client, we were told they had 3 email platforms that were sending on their behalf. What we actually found when we started receiving the egg reports was 18. So if that doesn't surprise you, that you have 18 vendors sending email on your behalf when you assume there was only 3, this just sort of explains the scope of the problem that many people don't know they have. There is also a large social network where the former postmaster is a good friend of mine. When they started to implement DMARC, their expectation from the postmaster group was that they had 300 mail servers sending mail on their behalf. When they implemented DMARC, what they actually found was 3,000 mail servers sending mail on their behalf. all legitimate, all within their own network, but pretty significant in regards to, as the team responsible for managing all of the email for their network, that a engineer could stand up an MTA and send mail and just let it run, not configured, not authenticated, but sending perfectly legitimate email on behalf of that organization. So as you consider looking at these projects, you will find things. You will be very surprised about some of the information that you find out about your mail streams. And this is not a unique situation. I have seen this time and time again when working with clients to implement DMARC. Another client that I worked with, and one that I will actually talk about in the future, when they started, they had individuals that were sending emails from other platforms. They had set up, email networks that were sending mail as their brand simply to get around certain IT policies. This is all sort of in the dark. You don't actually know what's happening with your email domains if you're not reviewing these reports. I would also say talk to your vendors. There are some vendors that publish DMARC records on your behalf with no reporting that may actually create blind spots in your program, because those domains now stop feeding back into a potential DMARC solution or a DMARC vendor that you participate in, that you're already using as a company if you're already trying to work and get down the path of DMARC. And really, the truth is out there. Domains of all sizes are targets. It's not just the traditional bank or financial service brands that everyone's thinking about. Loyalty programs are huge in regards to targeting security companies. We've seen several security companies breached over the years. Retail, airlines, all types of businesses are impacted by phishing, by spoofing, and really trying to engage in fraud at all different levels. As an example, my own personal domain. So this is a domain that utilizes email just for my wife and I. Last month, I was looking at my DMARC reporting, and over the course of a week, several thousand messages that we did not approve of, that we did not send, were sent under our domain name. And DMARC helped reject those messages from ever making it to their intended recipient. So in the steps that I've taken to protect my own personal brands really are things that you should be looking at to stop negative experiences from your consumers, to stop negative reputation drag, negative association for your brand by your domains being used in a fraudulent way. Even domains that don't send email, and I have a number of those domains that I've purchased that don't send email, that maybe just redirect to another website, a .net to a .com, a .ca to a .com, whatever that happens to be, those domains exist. You should protect those too and make sure your brand is doing the same thing. Why? So DMARC is a great example of a solution that solves a whole number of problems. One, it allows a brand to take control in many ways, the use of their properties, their email domains, their corporate domains, by basically saying, I want to know who's using my stuff. I want to know. You publish the record, you start to receive daily feedback, and all of these things allow you to understand in a much better way, a much more significant way, how your brand is being utilized on the internet. Is it approved? Is it not approved? Are there things happening that are fraudulent? And it allows you to look and have a real sort of understanding of what software and services your brand is using. I've worked with brands before that say that vendor hasn't been a vendor of ours in 2 years, but they're still sending email on our behalf because there is some type of automation campaign that nobody's paid attention to that's just been running. Links are broken, stuff's outdated, but customers are still receiving emails from it. It allows you to look and fix alignment issues. It allows you to actually request from the mailbox provider when things fail, take an action. Put the message in the junk folder. reject the message. Simply don't accept it. These things take time. These projects take time. And there's no time like the present to start all of these things. The other great thing about DMARC is you really only have to do it at the organizational level. So there's no need to do it at the subdomain level. There's no need to individually DMARC every single domain subdomain you own. Simply put one record at the top, and it applies the policy uniquely to, or applies the policy to all of your subdomains afterwards. So this is one of those great features. It's a do it once and then start getting the data for everything. You'd be surprised the number of domains that are utilized with false subdomains as well, because phishers and spoofers think they're not as well protected. So absolutely start at the root domain. It's also a prerequisite for BIMI. So I know I said I was going to talk about BIMI, and I will, but in order to do BIMI, DMARC is a prerequisite. So definitely make sure, if you're thinking about BIMI in the future, if you've never heard of it, I will talk about it in a few minutes. If you have heard of it and you're not doing it, but you're thinking about doing it, put a pin in it and say DMARC needs to come first. That's all I can say. Now, when it comes to doing DMARC and doing it well, there are things to consider, right? The length of time of the project. Most companies spend 6 months doing this project, maybe even longer, depending on the size of your organization and the drive from the organization to solve this problem. So I've seen brands do it in less time. I've seen brands do it ongoing, and they'll probably complete it, in a 5-year project. So depending on how you want to drive this internally within your organization, absolutely make sure that it's a solid plan and you're working with people who understand what the end goal of that project is. A lot of times people spend time tracking down, who owns this domain and why is it sending mail? Who's using these mail servers? Is this a vendor that's approved? So there's pieces all over that need to get tracked down. You'll probably talk to IT, you'll talk to marketing, you'll talk to sales, you may talk to your accounts payable group to figure out who's paying a bill for a vendor. That's a great way to understand what the vendor is and if it's approved or not, who's paying the bill. There have been many cases where a salesperson will create an account at a small ESP for their own personal use to send marketing communications or sales communications to their prospects and customers. All of these things can impact your brand reputation. And here's the why. So this was from a case study from 2018 put together by 250OK, which is now Validity, with one of their customers, Furniture Row. So after Furniture Row took the time to go from not doing DMARC, moving right through to a DMARC P equals reject, these are some of the impacts that they saw with their communications. Open rates jumped from 6 to 8% across the board on their communications. Unique open rates went up 1 to 2%. So when marketers ask me, what can I do to impact open rates? What can I do to impact performance? What can I do to drive consumers to like my mail more? Having better authentication can help do that. Click rates improved 5 to 6%, and open to click increased 1.5 to 2%, depending on the campaign that they were sending. So performance overall gets better. And why is that? Because you get rid of the noise, you get rid of the bad traffic. And in some cases, you find that traffic that you didn't know you were sending that is harming your reputation with a mailbox provider, and you bring it into compliance. And then once you bring that into compliance, that negative impact to your reputation goes away. So DMARC's not the reason that this happened. It's the project to implement DMARC that is the reason that these types of things happen. Their reputation improved with Gmail from medium to high, which allowed them to send mail faster and send more volume in a month, as well as a global inbox placement rate increase across the board at all the major mailbox providers that they worked with, to send mail to, of 10 to 15%. So all of these things, when customers ask me, what can I do to impact my reputation, to impact my campaigns, to get better performance, this is a project that I would say time and time again will help you get better at what you're already doing. If these numbers don't make your eyes light up and get really happy about a project like this, then I think we need to come back to the drawing board and say, what are you doing with your email program? And when you ask, right, what can I do to get more opens and more clicks? This is going to be one of those solutions that's going to be presented time and time and time again. As I mentioned, once you do all of this, you can implement Bimmy. And what does Bimmy do? Bimmy makes your inbox look like this. So you're going to get personal avatars of individuals. You're going to get brand logos showing up in your email clients. You're going to get brands that aren't implementing Bimmy showing up with question marks or no avatar or a default avatar. This question mark avatar might be something you recognize already. If you're a Gmail user for mail that's not authenticated, they will put the avatar of a question mark up, or a X, some type of avatar indicating that it's an unknown. So would you rather have your brand logo showing in the inbox? Would you rather have your brand or your personal avatar showing up? The two slightly different technologies in the personal avatar. It's driven more by your mailbox. However, if you think about your brand messaging, and that's the piece you really want to stand out, is your brand messaging, having your avatar in a client that your end user is able to see is going to be a big driver for a lot of brands. Now, I don't have any firm studies on this, but I did talk with a large online retailer when they implemented Bimmy, when only the Yahoo Mail client was showing the logo. And anecdotally, what they told me was that simply by getting their logo to show at Yahoo, their open and click-through rates went up by about 2 to 5%, depending on the campaign. So this shows that brand recall, image recall associated with a brand name when displayed to a consumer will also drive engagement and drive brand recognition and drive consumers to interact with your messaging that much better. So again, we're talking small incremental improvements, 2-3%. That's not, it doesn't sound huge, but when you're talking 2-3% of 100 million, those numbers become staggering. So certainly look at this, put this on the roadmap as something you need to do. Right now, like I said, it's available in the Yahoo Mail clients. It's coming soon to a Gmail box near you. And if you're the average marketer that has a 50% mailbox destination bound to Gmail or Google Workspace, having your brand logo show up next to your email name is going to be something that you're going to want to be participating in as soon as possible. So all of these things need to come together to make that happen. Google will also require additional information beyond just publishing a logo. You'll need to be able to get a certificate, which requires things like trademark ownership and verification of the brand. So there are additional steps. The general idea being, how do we tie ownership of a logo to a domain and make them stick? And that's the whole point of Bimmy. I've also been talking a lot with DMARC vendors and brands that are interested in Bimmy. And one of the things that they are saying is, if you show a logo like this, those brands that have their logo displayed get actioned and engaged with from consumer preference in a sort of mock environment, if you will. So these are consumer research and consumer advocacy studies, because nothing is live that for them to test. But they're saying when a consumer sees a brand, they're significantly more likely to engage with that brand than when they don't see the brand. If they see the default avatar, or they see a question mark, or they see just like an initial. So you want to make sure that your brand logo shows everywhere that you can. What else is good about Bimmy? Bimmy exists outside of email as well. You can implement Bimmy in a way that a search engine could put your logo next to search results for your brand. a social platform could keep your logo up to date in their application based on the domain associated with your account. There is an endless number of possibilities for Bimmy in regards to where you want to, have a logo shown. Once you set it up and once you get it configured and it's available, that logo can be updated in one place and implemented across a variety of platforms beyond just email. So how to implement Bimmy? Obviously, you need all of the building pieces in order to get there. You need to have the right type of SVG graphic, which is probably the most complicated piece for most people. There are some great tutorials at thebimmygroup.org for how to build a proper SVG image. You need to implement the proper DNS records. You need to have DMARC with alignment, ad enforcement, which requires DKIM and SPF to all be managed properly as well. So all of these different types of things work together to implement this. And by doing these things, hopefully you've seen today some examples of brands that have worked hard to implement authentication, how it has impacted their engagement with consumers, and how it has really driven for them those customer satisfaction points of putting the customer first. Andrew, I don't know if we have any time for questions, but if we do, I'm open to it. Otherwise, you can reach me at any of my different platforms here, email Karma and in most places.
Hey, Matt, how's it going? There are, I think, a few questions in the chat room. I was focusing actually on your presentation and not the chat room behind me. But there was certainly someone asking. So what Nelly's done is extended the session by a few minutes. I don't know if you've got the chat room open there.
I don't have the chat room open, so I can't see the question.
One of the earliest questions was around what happens when the bank starts asking those questions, like what was your personal details, like your mother's maiden name and all the rest of it. There was some conversation about being careful what you share on social. We just wanted to clarify. How do you make sure when you're dealing with the bank and they're asking for questions that you're saying people shouldn't be answering to other people, like where did you go to school and what have you? How do you check that? I would suggest, copying and pasting URLs in manually, but I'm sure you've got an answer.
So I think the thing there is when you're utilizing these questions, security questions, as actual security tools as an end user, that's great. Implement those security questions with your bank. They're designed to be there for a reason. But when you're on Facebook and someone says, fill out this questionnaire of all the things you've done in your life, and some of those look remarkably like those security keyword questions, like, where did your parents meet? What was your first car? What's your favorite color? What was your first pet's name? Those types of things are basically you giving away potential answers to those same security questions that you should be reserving just for the applications that require them. The other alternative is, instead of using your mother's maiden name, use your grandmother's maiden name if you know it. That's a great way to have that one-step disconnect for some of those questions. Or where did your grandparents meet versus where did your parents meet?
Find out family history at the same time.
You learn a little family history at the same time, but it's just enough that, Andrew, we've been friends a long time, and maybe I know where your parents met because you've told me in a story, or maybe I know your mother's maiden name because you've told me in a story of something. So it removes that social element by one step that makes it something less commonly known by other individuals.
And we've only got 2 minutes, but I'll try and get one question in quickly. So another question, and feel free to join them in chat because there's lots more. Splitting reputation on a subdomain basis. How much do you think ISPs, mailbox providers, are doing that?
Segmenting reputation by domain. So domain.
So how are they? Are they separating? Are they treating subdomains differently? How effective do you think that is?
So yeah, there is the idea that each subdomain has their own reputation. However, I would I would cautiously say, ISPs will be looking at the global reputation of a brand as well. It would be improper to say that they don't associate sub.domain.com with domain.com, because they absolutely do. So really, it's a global perspective on what your domain's doing. But for different mail streams, they're going to allow each of those to also carry a reputation. And that's why I suggest marketing on one, support on another, transactional on a third, etc., so that you have individual domain reputation that hopefully ties back to a very positive brand reputation as well.
Sure. Nelly is waving that I believe that the platform's going to cut us off regardless.
All right.
Oh, she's extended it again. Nelly said, I've just extended it. You've got 5 minutes. She's never going to let you go, Matt.
I'm around. I'm going to be around all day too if you want to send me private messages. But absolutely, let's take another question if you want.
Sorry, from Maveen. Nelly says there's a question from Maveen. Last question from Maveen.
Stop sharing. There we
go. There's a lot there, Nelly.
I'm trying to get to the questions myself so I can read them. So.
Okay, so at Hotmail, an IP gets blocked because of a smart screen spam filter. Hotmail doesn't share the reason for the IP block. How would you handle such an incident?
So when it comes to these types of things, understanding, the data that you do receive back. To get to the questions myself so I can read them. So. Apologies. So when it comes back to the feedback that you're getting, your mailbox provider is likely signed up for feedback loops from Microsoft or any of the major mailbox providers that supply them. You will see potentially trends in things that are driving complaints. You'll potentially see trends in consumer behavior that is driving towards a negative experience that you can then act on, implement changes for, and really sort of start to understand, is it a specific mail stream? Is it a specific type of message? Is it a way that you're communicating that is potentially driving consumers to report your mail as spam and thus implement an IP block? There are some technical things as well, such as volume you're sending too fast, sending too many invalid addresses. So there's some hygiene things that need to be implemented and considered as well.
Sure. Well, I think there's, the questions will be going non-stop. So Matt will be around for the next few hours and be in and out of the conference over the next couple of weeks. I know you're also going to be at M3, so busy like a lot of people for a few days. But yeah, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for everyone to speak. I can already see Jennifer Cannon's backstage. So I believe Tejas should also be joining us shortly. So what I will do is play a couple of infomercials and get the others prepared for the next session. Thanks so much, Matt. You definitely generated a lot of questions and comments in the chat room. So yeah, plenty of value as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I'll read the questions now and do my best to answer them.
Cheers. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.